Hey guys, it's Kiera, and as you probably already know, when you're creating a logo, you're almost trying to reflect the brand's values, tones, colors, and pretty much everything else in this big visual identity package. So this logo is reflecting the brand, and the brand is reflected in the logo, vice versa. And even in the logo, you're trying to keep this consistency going throughout. Because if you use, let's say, one color, let's say red, you don't want to be mixing it with a whole different color scheme later on, right? You want to be keeping it very contained and very consistent. So even though the logo might itself be very representative of what the brand is, you need to make sure that the logo as a visual language is also very consistent on the actual corners that it uses, the angles, and even the spacing. Because you can imagine that if your entire logo uses very sharp cut edges of 90 degrees, then having small edges of 91 degrees that don't really serve a purpose, well, they should be 90 degrees as well, because if they don't serve a purpose, they may as well follow this rule of consistency. So we'll be doing a very basic proofing of a logo. Here we have just an FUI. There are a few inconsistencies with it, and we'll just be proofing it very quickly. So the first thing that I usually proof is the corners. And all that means is that we look at the logo, and we see that if any of the corners are off, or somehow misleading, or too rounded, or really don't follow this consistency. So in this case, every single corner is pretty much hard cut edge, right? We don't really see any roundness, which is good, so we're being consistent on that part. But on this very U part, well, there's a little jagged edge to show kind of speed, but it's nowhere else to be found. It's only in this one place. And because of that, because of this corner rule, kind of doesn't follow this consistency. So we can just remove it, and we're already on a better start. Had to remove it twice. And even in this case, every single corner here kind of follows the exact same rule. And we're going to double check it with angles, but all the corners are pretty much very hard cut. Except in this case. In this case, it's kind of slanted again with kind of a different corner, you may as well say. So we can just bring it back and bring it all the way up so it snaps. Just so we have consistent corners going throughout. So that's the first thing that we're going to prove. The next thing that we're going to prove is angles. So are all your lines slants and directions, are they kind of following the same pathway and very same consistency rule? Again, very easy to check. So most of our slants are going from top down, and we get this almost roughly 10 degrees, 5 degrees. So we're just going to draw a line all the way to here. It's going to snap. Then we're just going to take it, and I think we're just going to add a stroke to it. And we're going to make it pink just so we can see it for now. Alright, so this is our angle. And we can just click Command F and just check if the other angles follow. And this one does, and I'm just going to do it quickly for the other ones. It snaps as well. And we're just checking that each angle is the same. Because if some of the angles are not the same, then it's just going to look a bit awkward, and in 2 years when you see this logo, you might have some regrets. So the angles are fine here. It should perfectly snap if it is alright. The angles are fine here, almost. That we're gonna have to fix. So I'm just gonna drag it all the way here. And we're gonna select this point and make sure that it aligns. Then I'm just gonna go back, Command C, Command F, and drag it across. And this one aligns as well. So that's perfect. Every single one of these slants align perfectly. So now we just have to do it for this little part. So I'm just going to drag another line across, holding Shift to make sure that these 2 points are on the same plane. And then I'm just going to click and drag. We're going to do Object, Transform, Reflect. That way it reflects on the same plane, and we're going to check the other side. And it matches up perfectly. So I'm going to do the exact same thing for the upper part now. So I'm going to grab the line tool, click and drag, and I'm going to go to Object, Transform, Reflect, and drag it all the way across. And in this case, we actually have a pretty large inconsistency. So just to compare, I'm going to paste it again, and I'm going to reflect it how it was before. And we can see that this edge is coming a bit too close inwards. So I can just click and push this outwards. And now we're following the rule of consistency. And because these two angles should be the same, I'm just gonna take this one again and I'll draw out a new line. Line it up. Perfecto. Command C, Command F. And we're gonna transform it once more. And this is what you'd call proofing or gridding. You'd often see like black and white breakdowns of this on Dribble, though sometimes they're a little bit not needed for what it's worth. But again, logo is proofed and the angles seem perfectly fine. So now we have to check the actual spacing, and the spacing is not only the actual spacing between each letter or the logo and the typeface, but also the spacing in between the logo. So the actual distance of the F and the distances in the U, we need to make sure that they're the same. Otherwise, we're going to have the U be slightly thicker than the F, and if we're trying to be consistent, this could look a bit awkward. So I'm going to delete these points for now. No, we don't even have to delete all of them. And I'm just going to draw out another line tool. Or we can even use a square in this case. So I'm just going to draw out a square. It's going to lock on when we hit the path. I'm going to drag this all the way down. And we see that the inconsistency rule needs to be a bit fixed up here. And this is perfect. And we're going to make sure that that same rule applies to the U. And it does. So now we just have to proof the actual F going up. Same for the U. So I'm going to draw out a square again, even though we could use the line tool again. Wouldn't be a problem. And in fact, I think that's what we're going to do. We're just going to check if the base is the same on the top and bottom. So line segment tool, click and drag. And even if you want, you can go to transform and you'll see the distance right here. And there we go. The width is 80.515. So we can just match it up right here. But it falls on exactly. Falls on exactly. Falls on exactly. Right to the edge. And I'm just using geometric shapes and lines just to prove it. If we see that there is a big inconsistency, we can of course be a bit more specific. If we see the green guides come out, then we know that it locks on perfectly. So that's good, and the spacing here is perfect. So that's pretty much it. This is all really that goes into somehow proofing a logo. Again, if you have a lot of curves, you'd want to use circles and compare the circle sizes. But in general, you're just making sure that the logo has some sort of inconsistency, because whether it be a typeface or a logo, you want to make sure that the corners are always correct. Because in most cases, if it doesn't look correct, or if all of your corners are very sharp cut, and then there's one that's just randomly rounded, that's perfectly fine. But if it doesn't serve a purpose, if there's no specific meaning or reason why you did implement that change, then there's no reason for there to be a change, right? A brand is all about being consistent. We're going to be creating visual identities in the next lesson, which is going to be all about making sure that this brand and this visual identity will always be very consistent in the future. So with your logo, we may as well have a lot of consistencies in there as well. So I'll see you in the next lesson, and the homework is down below. So if you want to quickly see if you can proof a logo just for practice, then go right ahead. All right, so I'll see you in the next lesson.